Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Look, whether you're just fascinated by the human mind, or you're a psychology student looking for that ultimate revision guide before your big exams, you've landed in the exact right spot. Just think of me as your senior psychology tutor for today. So, go ahead, grab your highlighters, get your notepads ready, because we are going to build a massive mental mind map of the 5 major frameworks that psychologists use to actually understand human thought, behavior, and growth. By the end of this explainer, you're going to have a rock-solid grasp on all these perspectives.
Let's kick things off with a massive question. Why on earth do humans behave the way they do? I mean, what exactly shapes our personality, our emotions, and our capacity to grow? These are, literally, the fundamental mysteries of human existence. And, throughout history, psychologists have developed these different lenses to try and answer those exact questions.
But before we actually look at those different lenses, let's quickly open up our mental glossary and define our core toolkit here. What even is a psychological theory? Well, picture it as a central hub of a mind map, right? And from that center, it branches out into all these different pathways of understanding. How we learn, how we grow, how we feel, and how we interact with the world around us. It's basically an organized set of ideas used to decode the whole human experience.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're covering the 5 major pillars of psychology. First up, behavioral theory. Second, cognitive theory. Third, humanistic theory. Fourth, psychodynamic theory. And fifth, biological theory. And then, finally, we'll wrap it all up by comparing the perspectives side by side. All right, let's dive right into this.
Section 1. The behavioral theory. So this first perspective is incredibly fascinating because it looks purely at the outside world to explain our actions. It literally ignores what's going on invisibly inside your head, and instead it focuses strictly on observable behavior. Behaviorists believe that human behavior is learned purely through our interactions with the environment, specifically through rewards, punishments, and conditioning. Imagine a student getting tons of praise for raising their hand. Well, that's a reward that's going to increase that behavior. Or on the flip side, a teenager getting grounded for missing curfew. That's a punishment specifically designed to decrease a behavior.
Now, if you're taking notes for an exam, B.F. Skinner and Ivan Pavlov are the 2 historical giants you absolutely must remember here. Pavlov's classic case study involved classical conditioning, where he famously trained dogs to salivate just at the sound of a ringing bell. And Skinner? He used an operant conditioning box, often with a rat pressing a lever, to prove that animals learn through direct consequences. But here's a major criticism you'll definitely need to know for your test. This theory is incredibly deterministic. It largely ignores human free will and complex thought. All right, time for a quick practice question to test your knowledge. If you train a dog to sit using treats, which theorist's principles are you applying? Well, if you guess Skinner, you are right on the money.
Moving right along, Section 2, cognitive theory.
Let's see how this second pillar builds our understanding. We're shifting our lens entirely now. If the behavioral theory only looks at the outside, the cognitive theory moves completely to the inside. It focuses on internal mental processes like thinking, memory, perception, and learning. Cognitive theory basically views the human mind kind of like a complex software program. When you face a problem, you don't just react blindly to a reward or punishment, right? No, your brain inputs data, it retrieves memory files, and it actively computes a rational solution.
Cognitive psychologists firmly believe that our thoughts influence our behavior. It's really about what you think about external events that matters. A key historical figure to remember here is Jean Piaget. He famously observed his own kids playing with toys, like spinning tops, and he realized they weren't just passively watching, they were actually actively constructing their understanding of the physical world, stage by stage. Now, a common criticism you should jot down is that cognitive theory can sometimes compare humans a bit too rigidly to machines, which kind of downplays the messy role of raw human emotion. Okay, review question for your notes. Which theory focuses on internal software rather than external rewards? That would be the cognitive approach.
All right, Section 3, humanistic theory.
This one is perhaps the most optimistic of all the psychological frameworks because it fully embraces free will and human potential. Unlike the other theories that say we're just, programmed by our environment or acting like mindless computers, humanistic psychologists believe that every single person has the inherent ability to grow, improve, and achieve self-fulfillment. Just think about a time you pursued a really challenging hobby, maybe painting or playing the guitar, simply because it brought you joy and a profound sense of purpose. That internal drive toward self-actualization, that is the humanistic theory in action.
The absolute key figures who championed this empowering approach are Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. You've probably heard of Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs. It's that classic pyramid model illustrating how we have to satisfy our basic survival needs, like food and safety, before we can climb to the very top and actually reach self-actualization. For your exam notes, keep the main criticism of this lens in mind. The humanistic theory is often seen as way too subjective, and it is notoriously difficult to measure scientifically in a lab. Self-test time. Who are the two historical giants of the humanistic approach? Make sure to keep Maslow and Rogers locked in your memory.
Next up, Section 4, Psychodynamic Theory. Okay, let's dive below the surface for this one. We are leaving the conscious, optimistic realm of the humanistic approach far behind, and we're exploring the hidden, murky depths of the human mind. Developed by Sigmund Freud, the psychodynamic theory emphasizes the immense role of the unconscious mind. Have you ever experienced a Freudian slip? You know, saying one thing out loud when you meant entirely another. Well, Freud argued that those aren't just random verbal accidents. He believed there are hidden thoughts and deeply repressed desires actively leaking out from your unconscious to shape your behavior. To explain how these hidden forces work, Freud broke human personality down into 3 core concepts: the id, the ego, and the superego. Think of it like a giant iceberg. Freud believed our conscious, waking mind is just the tiny tip showing above the water. Beneath the surface, the id is the primal desire lurking in the deep. The superego is basically our moral angel demanding absolute perfection. And the ego? That's the conscious self caught right in the middle, desperately trying to balance the two. Now, a major exam prep criticism to write down. Freud's theories are highly unscientific and nearly impossible to test objectively today. Quick check for you. Which part of the personality acts as the moral compass? That would be the superego.
And finally, Section 5, Biological Theory.
For our 5th and final pillar, we leave abstract concepts of the mind entirely behind, and we look strictly at the physical body. The biological theory explains human behavior through physical factors, things like genetics, hormones, and the nervous system. If you picture a detailed anatomical diagram of the brain, the biological theory looks at how specific physical structures directly govern our daily behavior. For example, how the amygdala regulates our fear responses, or how the frontal lobe manages our complex decision-making.
Now, this gives us a brilliant point of contrast to write down. Unlike the psychodynamic view, which, blames childhood trauma or hidden desires for our struggles, biological psychologists look straight at the hardware. Take the classic case study of Phineas Gage. He was a railroad worker whose personality completely changed from polite to incredibly aggressive after a tragic physical injury to his frontal lobe. Biology influences behavior directly. A simple lack of specific brain chemicals can cause a mental disorder, plain and simple. The main criticism here? It can be overly reductionist. It kind of reduces incredibly complex human emotions like love and sadness to mere chemical equations. Final pop quiz for this section. Which theory would blame a lack of serotonin for a bad mood? The biological theory, for sure.
All right, Section 6, Comparing the Perspectives.
Now that we've explored all 5 pillars individually, let's bring them all together to see how they form a complete picture of human nature. Let's really lock this in for your exam. I want you to deliberately read through this summary table and literally take a mental screenshot of it, okay? Behavioral is all about learned behavior. Cognitive focuses strictly on thinking processes. Humanistic centers on personal growth. Psychodynamic explores the unconscious mind. And biological looks at the brain and genetics. The truth is, no single theory has all the answers. But by combining these different perspectives, psychologists can truly begin to understand the immense complexity of who we are.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to really test your own understanding. Which of these 5 lenses best helps you understand yourself? I mean, are you simply the product of your brain chemistry, your hidden desires, or your conscious choices? Perhaps you're a beautiful, incredibly complex mix of them all. You see, understanding these theories isn't just about passing a psychology test. It's about better understanding ourselves and the people around us. Keep questioning the mind, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.